following implies movement. And to follow is like you are literally actively taking steps in his direction.
Hey there, welcome to the Testify Long Island Podcast, the faith-based podcast designed to inspire, encourage, and strengthen you in your faith journey. Whether you're new to believing, walking through trials, or standing firm in God's promises, this is a place where testimonies come to life. Here we share real stories of transformation, hope, and unwavering faith, because your testimony has power. Now before we begin, quick word from our sponsor. Hey there, welcome back to the podcast. Our sponsor today is local church in Farmingville that is sponsoring today's podcast, being able to have the podcast in facility today, which is awesome and has been ongoing. So we're very thankful for local church. My name's DJ and we got a special guest with us today. Today we're excited to welcome a good friend of ours, good friend of mine, Michael Liebler. Born and raised Long Island native, musician extraordinaire, gifted singer, and passionate pastor. Michael, alongside his incredible wife, Emily, co-founded a local church right here in Farmingville, where they've been faithfully serving, raising up leaders, and investing in the heart of the community. Beyond his role as a mentor and spiritual leader, Michael's passion for church planting has led him to launch the soon-to-be Church Plant Journey podcast, a space to equip, inspire, and encourage those stepping into the wild and beautiful world of church planting. We're honored to have him with us today. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for coming on, man.
What's up, DJ? It's my honor to be here.
How are you today?
Excellent. Thank you for that fascinating intro.
You're welcome.
I feel so honored and loved.
I loved being able to write things. It was awesome. So, Mike, can you share your faith journey? How did you come to know Christ?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was, like you said, born and raised on Long Island. And just like 60% of Long Islanders, I grew up Catholic. And so my mom would drag me to church, anytime she was going to church. And it wasn't necessarily my cup of tea. I didn't necessarily love the Catholic Church experience that I had, but I went because she made me. And as soon as I was old enough to basically say no, and she couldn't physically force me in the car and get me to go to church, I did. I was like, no way, I don't want this to be a part of my life anymore. So I stopped going to church. And then when I was in summer between 9th grade and 10th grade, my family took a road trip to Missouri to visit my grandfather and my aunt and uncle who lived out there. And what I thought was just going to be a fun vacation, they live in Lake of the Ozarks, so it was going to be like a lake vacation, turned into something so much more. Because the first night that we were there, I'm essentially meeting these family members for the first time. It's been years since I had seen them when I was little. So basically, it's our first introductions. And the first thing that my aunt says to me is, "You should come to our church tomorrow night." And I'm like, oh my goodness. And because I'm making my first impression, I want her to like me. So I was like, yeah, sure. I'd love to go to your church. Really, on the inside, though, I was screaming and saying, no, this is supposed to be my vacation. I don't want to go to church on vacation.
That's a heck of a way to go on vacation.
Yeah,
too.
For real. But I went, and I am so glad that she had the courage to invite me to her church, because it completely changed my life. It was the first time I ever went to a church that wasn't Catholic. And when I got there, the very first thing I noticed was that everybody seemed to want to be there. They all seemed happy. And they had like just normal clothes on, t-shirts and shorts and all that. My first experience was a youth group experience. So it was a lot of kids my age too, which was pretty cool. There was a dude like sitting in the corner playing the guitar. And I was fascinated by that. At that point, I wasn't musical at all. So I remember experiencing that night. And by the end of the night, the youth pastor named John, he came up to me and he asked me like one of the most important questions anybody's ever asked me. there he was in like this bright orange shirt. It said "Stoked" on it, with jean shorts and socks and sandals. Bald guy, like your typical youth pastor.
That is a youth pastor.
But he had like the best question at just the right time. He looked at me and he said, "Hey, what do you know about Jesus?" It's a great question, because both of us discovered pretty quickly that I knew basically nothing about Jesus. I had seen him on statues, on a cross, in church, but that was pretty much all I knew of Jesus. And that night was the first time that I thought about God differently. He began to explain to me like who Jesus was. And up until that point, I would always think about God as this like cosmic bully, angry and mad and always mad at me. And for the first time, I saw God through the lens of Jesus. I saw God through the lens of grace and love and forgiveness. And not everybody has this experience, but for me, it was like a transformation, like instantly in me. Just something clicked that changed my life forever. And from that moment on, I knew like I gotta find out more. I gotta go deeper in this faith thing. I want to go deeper in a relationship with God, because I wasn't even aware that was a possibility, to have like a personal relationship with God until that night. And so, it was so transformative to me that I asked my parents if I could stay the rest of the summer, because that church there in Missouri had a youth camp coming up at the end of the summer. They were talking about it, and I'm like, I want to go. And so they're like, well, if you can stay, you can come. And I'm like, all right. So I asked my parents, they let me stay the summer. By the end of the summer, I asked them if I could stay the school year, and because I wanted to keep going back to church, of all things. And I called them, and they were like, well, this is kind of weird, but sure, you can stay. So I spent my sophomore year of high school in Lake of the Ozarks, Missouri, with my grandfather, my aunt and uncle, going to church like 4 times a week and learning as much as I could about Jesus. It was then that I learned how to play the guitar as well and started singing. By the end of my time there, I was up on the stage on Sunday mornings leading people and singing to God, and it was an incredible, transformative year. So long answer to your question, that's kind of how my faith journey began.
That's awesome. Yeah. Like to know it and where you came from. That sounds like, I can't imagine the story, like if you were watching it through like the lens of like a sitcom, like watching this unfold, like watching Michael go from this and to God finding him, to playing music, to leading worship. Like, it's really cool, like just thinking about it. I don't know the way I'm seeing it.
Yeah, it's a huge 180.
Yeah.
And those stories are always engaging. They're always fun, because I definitely was at a point in my life where I did not think church would be a part of my life ever again.
Yeah.
And then now here I am, like years later. It is my life. It's amazing. So
that's amazing.
That's one story.
So could you elaborate a little bit more on your like this specific moment that the light switch happened? Like, what was like? Could you explain more of the specific moment, and or like the season of your life where your faith really became real to you? Like, expand that a little bit more.
Yeah, like I said before, it's not everybody has this experience, but for me, it was pretty instant in that moment. It was just having a realization that God loves me, and that was the very first thing. And again, I don't remember exactly what John said, the youth pastor there, but I know the gist of it. Like the gist of it, what I heard, what I understood in that moment was God loves me, and I just never thought of God as loving until that moment. And again, for me, it was almost instant. My faith became real in that moment. Like, I can't think of a time, that was over 20 years ago. I can't think of a time in the last 20 years that I haven't taken faith seriously since. Like, it's always been my top priority from that moment on. And I think, again, it just came from just understanding that, first of all, God loves me. And secondly, that he wants to have a personal relationship with me. And that's actually something that I can have with God. And those things just, I don't know, they catapulted me into a whole new life, a whole different life than what I thought, my life was going to look like, but a better life. I mean, I'm so grateful for my faith. I'm so grateful for everything that God has done for me, and for the ability that I now get to share that with others is incredible. incredible.
That's amazing. Did you? I have to ask this. After you felt this light switch, a little off script here.
It's okay.
Did you feel like the outfit John was wearing was something like you could pull off?
That is a wonderful question. Yes, one day I aspire to be John Webb. Bald, socks and sandals, bright orange, cheesy Christian shirt with jean shorts. Yes.
We got to get you an outfit just to send him a picture.
This Halloween. I need to be John Webb for Halloween this year. Yes. I love you, John. You mean the world to me. You know what's so great about John's just persona and even the way he dressed and everything is that he's approachable.
Yeah.
Right. I think that there is a place for youth pastors to be cool, people like that, I guess. But man, I feel like approachable is greater than cool, because I wasn't afraid to talk to him, and sometimes because I don't consider myself the coolest person on the planet, so sometimes I'm intimidated by other people who dress really fancy, or who use really cool slang words or whatever. I'm not sure that I'll be able to relate to them or what will they think of me. It's all my own insecurities. But when you wear an outfit that's like John Webb's outfit, it's disarming, it's all right. I can talk to this guy, So anyway, I love that about John. I love that about any pastor or leader really who just doesn't take themselves too seriously. I think that's a good thing. Yeah.
Amazing. John, I hope if you see this podcast, I hope that you know that Michael loves you and you definitely have played a big part in his life.
Absolutely.
So, all right. So how has your relationship with God shaped the way you view your purpose in life?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say in every regard, my relationship with God has shaped my purpose. Absolutely. I mean, literally, it is because of my relationship with God that we're here today, that we're even in this building, that we're speaking in the first place, because my relationship with God ultimately led me and my wife, Emily, to move back to Long Island when eventually we moved to Missouri. Even though we grew up on Long Island, I spent a year there. Eventually, we got married and moved back there, and I started working at the church that my aunt invited me to.
Wow, full circle.
Yes, it was crazy. But I had always just felt such a strong connection to that place. And so as I got older and realized, I could go anywhere. I could do anything with my life. The one thing I really wanted to do is go back to that place where I just had such transformation happen and so many amazing people that I met and who loved me. And so I did. We went back there and I actually became the full-time worship pastor there for a couple of years. And I thought at one point that was going to be the rest of my life. I was going to spend my life in Lake of the Ozarks, Missouri. But it's because of my relationship with God, it's because of my faith, that, I was attuned to the fact that God had a different purpose for me. As you spend more and more time with Jesus, and more time willing to listen, he starts to speak. And one of the things that I could not deny was just his prompting that it was time for us to move back to Long Island and start a church. And that's scary. I mean, everything about that is scary. When you go from living in a place that has a pretty great quality of life for a pretty low cost of living, to now uprooting from that to going to the highest cost of living in the country, essentially. One of,
Long Island really is. It's up there. It's like California is the second or something.
It's crazy. Yeah. And then to go start a church where nobody goes to church, statistically speaking, when you look at the numbers, nobody's going to church here compared to how many people are going to church everywhere else. It just sounds like you're destined for failure at that point. Mm-hmm. But I could not shake the fact that this is my purpose. This is what God is calling me to do. Because my faith absolutely informs every part of what I feel my purpose is. So does that answer your question?
It does.
Yeah. Okay.
It does. Do you want to expand a little bit also on your story on like coming back to Long Island briefly? Would you mind
Yeah,
sharing
sure.
that? Like what I briefly know it, but I'd love for you to share with some people like what was that, like you were saying you were full-time worship pastor over at Lake of the Ozarks. What was like, why'd you like you're telling me you felt like God was calling you back? Like what triggered it? Like were you just sitting there? Were you just sitting there one day and like a message triggered it? You got a letter in the mail? Like
No,
what happened
that's
there?
a great question. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I love talking about church planting. Obviously, we're going to kick off a whole podcast all about church planting pretty soon, which I'm excited about. But yeah, the story for our story begins really. I have a date. It's June. I'm going to jumble. I think it's June 19th, 2019. Maybe it's June 21st, 2019. Summer 2019. We'll just say that.
Okay.
All right, so this is where it really became real. So for about a year, from the summer of 2018 to 2019, our church had been talking about church planting and what it would look like for us to be a part of, sending people out to go plant churches. And so, the seed was kind of planted. I'd already been thinking about it, but not for me. I was thinking about how our church could assist other church planters until summer of 2019. It was summer of 2019. I had a very rare week where, as a full-time staff member of the church, I actually had a Sunday off.
That exists.
Which rarely happens, right? Yes,
it doesn't exist, but okay.
Yeah. It's very rare. So I'm like, wow, this is going to be a great Sunday. I don't have any responsibilities. At the time, I was actually the executive pastor at that point.
Okay.
So it was even more crazy. But I didn't have to sing. I didn't have to lead anything. I didn't have to speak. I didn't have to host. I didn't have to train, nothing. I just got to come to church. And I'm like, this is going to be an amazing morning. So I lived next door to the church at that point too. So there I go, walking into church, just ready to have a refreshing, enjoyable Sunday as a person who just gets to be there and just gets to be poured into. I didn't have to do any pouring out. And as I'm sitting in service, for every single element of the service, like everything, as I'm chatting with other people, connecting with people, even like the announcement time when they're talking about missions and they're talking about baptism, they're talking about what the church is doing in the community as my pastor was speaking, as we were singing songs, for every single element of the service, this question just kept coming to the forefront of my mind. And I knew it wasn't my question. This is such like a typical Jesus thing, right? Jesus asked so many fantastic questions. And I knew it wasn't my question because I would never ask this. But as I'm sitting there, the question was, who's doing this on Long Island? As I'm thinking about I'm connecting with other people, as I'm singing these songs to God, as I'm listening to the message, as we're talking about baptism, all that stuff, it just kept coming. Who's doing this on Long Island? Who's doing this on Long Island? Who's doing this on Long Island? And so I stopped for a moment. I'm like, at that point, I'm like, I don't care about Long Island. It's just, Long Island's just riddled with potholes. It's just so expensive. It's crowded. That was my mindset at the time. Like, I'm so glad I got off of Long Island.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I was thinking about Long Island. So I knew it must have been Jesus.
Okay.
So after like the 10th time, I'm like, okay, fine. Who's doing this on Long Island? So I start thinking, and I start listing the churches that I know of on Long Island. And there are a lot of great churches. So I'm listing them off, and I get to 6, and there's way more than 6 amazing churches on Long Island. But I stopped at 6 because I realized, wow, there are literally 6 churches on my road. Like right there in Lake of the Ozarks, Missouri, you had to pass by 5 great churches. In 2.3 miles, you pass by 5 churches just to get to ours. And you could throw a rock and hit a great church. It's the Bible Belt, right?
Yeah.
And so I thought, like, oh my gosh, like there are so many churches here, and in comparison to Long Island, there's like none. Like it's. I think there's an organization on Long Island called Revive LI that put out some statistics, and I think nationwide there's like one church for every 3,200 people.
Okay.
And on Long Island, no, there's one church for every 1,400 people. On Long Island, there's only one church for every 3,200 people. Okay. Something like that. Some kind of statistic like that. Yeah, which is crazy. It's a big, huge gap. And so at that moment, I really started thinking seriously, okay, God, are you saying that you want us to go back to Long Island and start a church? And I was just like struck in that moment. What I thought was going to be a peaceful, refreshing day was like an encounter with God in a way that I totally did not expect. I remember after the service was over, going into one of the offices and just crying, just like sitting there like crying. All of a sudden, my heart, which used to be a little hardened towards Long Island, completely was open to it and broken for Long Island almost instantly. Again, it's kind of like that moment that I first came to faith. It was like transformative in an instant. Not everybody gets that, but
yeah.
I had that. And so as I was walking home that day, I remember walking with Emily, and I turned to her and I'm like, I think our life could be changing. She's like, what do you mean? And then I begin to tell her the story, and I'm like, I think we need to start praying about maybe one day planting a church on Long Island. And so from that moment on, we started really taking that seriously and praying, and then eventually that led to us being here.
I can't imagine her expressions with that. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
What does that mean? Like, wow. I mean, and we see where that's gotten us to today. Like,
yeah, absolutely. It's one of the ways that I feel like God confirmed that this is what he wanted us to do. The fact that Emily was on board, like,
wow.
Telling her like, I think this is what's going to happen, and her just being like, yeah, I think so too. I was like, okay,
Wow.
that's got to be confirmation.
God readied her, like, because I know like a lot of people, their wives, like if you throw something like that, especially if it's like moving, it's usually like a hesitant thing, and just if she was ready for it, it's like, okay, God planted that seed, like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, thank you for sharing this this trip, and then you coming here, and during the pandemic, nonetheless, too. I remember.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I did not know that would be a part of the story. Nobody knew that was going to be a part of their story, right? But yeah, so we really decided to take it seriously in basically the following year. So that was summer of 2019, and then by June of 2020, we really felt like God was essentially saying, "It's time. It's time." It's like because for that year from 2019 to 2020, we were praying, and we were really focusing on doing the best we could, because both Emily and I worked at that church at the time in Missouri. And we knew we didn't want to leave that church hanging. Like, we knew that church planting is in our future, but we don't want to like just up and leave some gaps in the church that we were currently serving at. So we got really serious about empowering as many other people as possible, so that when we exited, like our presence, our lack of presence there wouldn't be as felt. Like. No balls would get dropped because we were gone. Like we really wanted to do a good job at leaving. And so we spent the year praying, and then again, raising up as many other people and delegating and handing off as much stuff as we could, so that we could have a nice, clean exit. That we'd hopefully leave the church we were serving in even stronger. And obviously with COVID and the pandemic, like that, everything just got turned upside down. And so I think like that, maybe even that like mindset that we had was just unrealistic, and I think maybe it was holding us back from what God wanted. Like if I'm being completely honest, maybe there was a part of me that wasn't really trusting that God would take care of his church in Missouri if we left. All right. So, the pandemic came, and God's like, "You're going. I got this. I want you on Long Island." So
He made the way.
Yes, and everything's fine there. That church is great now, and it was really important for us to to just have that, to have the pandemic, and to have a couple other things that happened, at our previous church happen, because I'm not sure we would have left. There always would have been a reason for us to stay. There always would have been a reason for us to like stick around, somebody else to train, something else to do, where we almost needed God to like push us out the door. And essentially that's part of what COVID did for us. Is it like pushed us out the door. And I'm so glad that it did at this point.
That's amazing. And see how it's come since. Like, we're in 2025 now, and church is going on to its 4th birthday now, and
Yeah.
this is amazing. It really is. Like,
it's humbling. It's incredible.
so how has your faith now influenced the way you approach your work or running the church? How is it? I know it plays a big part in it. Like, how has it really influenced?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for me, I define faith as faith is really believing that God is who he says he is and that he'll do what he said he'll do. Right? Mm-hmm. And to believe is like to just be completely convinced. It's essentially trust. Like, I can trust God when he tells me who he is, and I can trust him that he'll get done what he says he's going to get done. And planning a church is really hard. It's really hard. But what gives me a little bit of courage, a lot of it of courage, is that this is not my church. Because God said, I will build my church. Right? Like, and so when I'm feeling afraid, when I'm feeling discouraged, when I am feeling confused and just unsure of what to do, like, my faith informs like every decision that we make and all the feelings that I have, because I can look back and say, but what did God say about this? Who is God and what did he say about this? All right, I can trust that this actually isn't my church. And so when problems arise, and as you know, plenty of problems arise, I can get all stressed out about that and, unhinged, if I let myself, or I can just realize, wait a second, this isn't necessarily my problem. This is God's problem, because this is God's church. And so I like to pray, what my pastor taught me, my pastor from our residency that we did in Kansas City, Tim Howie. He's my pastor today. He's my coach today. He's my mentor today. And he once taught me what he calls the Wheaties prayer. This is a prayer that somebody else taught him at one point, where he's like, when you're sitting down in the morning, getting ready to have your Wheaties, the prayer has nothing to do with Wheaties other than that. And when you're sitting there ready to have your Wheaties, I don't know who eats Wheaties anymore. I don't know. I'm sure there's plenty of people. But anyway, I don't ever eat breakfast at all. But when you're sitting there ready to have your Wheaties, he goes, and you're thinking about all the problems that are happening in your church. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to push your Wheaties away. And I want you to talk to God and say, God, we got a problem in your church. This person is a problem. This thing is a problem. The tech that constantly malfunctions is a problem. You've never had to experience that before.
Nope, never. Nope, no tech problems. Nope, never.
Yes. But then you sit there and as you're talking to God, you remind yourself, but God, this is not my problem. This is not my church. This is your church. So I'm asking you to come and do something about this problem. And then you pull your Wheaties back and you enjoy your breakfast and you go on with the rest of your day. Just completely trusting that God's got this. Now, obviously, there's a part for me to play in that. There's a responsibility that God has trusted me with, which is amazing. And I enjoy that. But ultimately, it's God's church. And really, it goes beyond that, too. I mean, I'm in the church world, right, in which this is my life, and I'm so grateful it is. But at the end of the day, even with the podcast that I'm getting ready to start, or with any other business that somebody might be in, or just with life in general, like, it's all God's. It all belongs to God, and it's all for God too. So we can stress about it, or we can invite God into it. And I think inviting God into it, in my experience, has made every aspect of my life and of what we do here at the church so much better. It's like the Apostle Paul says, there's so much more contentment in it as well. It's like when he says, I have found the secret to contentment, and I'm not perfect at this, but I feel like I've found the secret to contentment, and it's my faith. It's my faith. It's my trust in Jesus and my trust in God. I still feel fear every now and then. I still feel insecurity and sadness even, and sorrow. Yeah. But my faith is what gets me through it. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing that too. Like, I think that it doesn't. I think that'll inspire somebody thinking of that too. Like, the idea of like what your faith, how it influences you and how it helps you operate. I know it really does make a difference. So now my next question for you is: have you had like a recent challenge that you fully trusted God with. It could be recent, it could be years ago, it could be starting the church, but something that you like, something you knew like as a person, like there's nothing I can do here. Like this is completely out of my hands. Left field. You said, God, I need you. Like, could you have an experience like that?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, I mean, stuff like that happens all the time. I think maybe the biggest example I could share is planting a church on Long Island. You know, again, it's one of the most expensive places to go. It's like, it has all the ingredients necessary for like failure, you know,
for some odd reason.
I mean, it's expensive and people don't go to church. They don't like church. So why would you start a new church in a place like that? In fact, people asked me that before we got started. Why don't you go somewhere where they actually want to go to church? They're like, well, if it wasn't for God, I would. But I think that's probably like the biggest example I could share is it was hard to do that. And I think in particular, like raising the funds for church planting on Long Island was difficult. It's going to cost more money, you know, like to do it. And at that point, I had no experience fundraising. I had no idea like how to even go about that. And when I started sitting down to like figure out the numbers, because, you know, I kind of operate that way anyway. I like to have a plan. So when I sat down, like Nehemiah, you know, like surveying what was ahead and what was needed, you know, so if the king approached me, I can be like, this is what I need, you know. I wanted to have a plan ahead of time. So I'm looking at as I'm calculating, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is hundreds of thousands of dollars just to get started. Like, how are we going to do this? You know, if we want to start the way we felt like God called us to start.
Yeah.
Plenty of different kinds of churches out there, and they're all great and they're all necessary. For us, we felt like God was calling us to start what's called the large launch model, you know. Okay. And so it's just there's a lot involved, a lot of equipment, there's a lot of things to purchase, and you know you got to have a building and all that stuff. And I just had no idea how any of it was going to happen, and it caused me to literally hit my knees every single day and just pray like, God, I cannot see any other way that this will be accomplished without you.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna have to just do your thing. Like I'm again trusting that you are going to build your church, because there's no way I can do it. No way me in and of myself can do it. I'm so happy to be a part of it, and I will do whatever you tell me to do. But if I'm left up to myself, I can't see how this is possible. And so I forgot exactly what the wording of the question was, but does that hit on the answer there?
Does. Like, yeah. Now, just to elaborate a little bit more on that, do you have, or you probably talk about it a little bit more in your podcast too, like what was, and again, our situation here at local church is very unique because a lot of churches don't get a fully functional space to start. A lot of them are mobile. In our situation, did you find like a good starting number, like of like how much it does cost to get that start, like to get a church started?
What do you mean exactly?
Like how I'm asking like how much it actually costs to get like the church off the ground, to get it started. So like I guess construction, tech, furniture, little pieces. Yeah. If you don't know, that's okay.
No, I know. I used to have the specific number down to the cent memorized, but it's been a couple years now.
Okay.
But yeah, it was somewhere upwards of $1.5 million.
Wow.
To get that's not just to get started, but that was in startup funds plus the first 3 years.
Okay.
So when we set out to fundraise, we were trying to fundraise the first 3 years, because they say that church plants that don't make it, church plants that fail, typically fail within the first 3 years, and mainly because of finances.
Okay.
So our goal was, well, let's try to get this thing funded for the first 3 years, so that we have a better chance of beating that failure statistic.
Yeah.
Now, what I wish I would have known and wish I would have done differently had I known is I would have actually asked for more years than just the 3. Like those 3 years are that applies to essentially like the Midwest where people are going to church. Like I probably would have asked her fundraise for the first 6 years on Long Island if I could change things.
The Long Island pad right there.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so we knew it was gonna take about $1.5 million to get us launched and to get us through the first 3 years. Which again, I mean, that's a number that I have never seen that kind of money in my life. You know, like I have no idea how this is gonna happen when I first started calculating things. Which is again why it caused me. I gotta hit my knees here and I gotta pray or else this isn't gonna happen. So
wow, okay.
And it pretty much was accurate. I mean, we're in our third year right now, you know, and that's about what it took. Yeah. So God definitely came through, showed up.
That's amazing. He always does too. Yeah. Like, it's just something that you watch, and it's part of those stories. Like what have you? Like I can't do it. God, take it, and you watch him do these things, and yeah, I'm always excited, and I love watching things like that. Of course, the one thing that always gets me is the time crunch. It's like watching it, I'm like, I want to watch it happen within a couple months, not years worth. It's like, oh, okay, this is gonna take a while to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you talked about having a building too, and I did not expect that at all. I thought we were going to be portable, like most churches. I thought we were going to be in a movie theater or a school or something like that. But my wife, Emily, always felt like we were going to be in a church. And I remember saying, like, how does that even work? Like, you'd have two churches in the same building. That seems kind of strange. Like, but she just always like had a sense, like, I think we're going to be in a church. And I'm like, okay. And then when we first got back to Long Island, we had two big goals. We needed to find a building and build a team. That was our two big things, because we moved back to Long Island April 2021. We moved from Kansas City, where we did our church planting residency. And we had 6 months. Talk about a time crunch. We had 6 months to find a building, build a team, and launch. And we went everywhere. Any place that we could possibly think of that might have a space for us. We would go and physically give them letters, asking if they had a space for us to rent. And then we would spell out like a couple different options, like, hey, you know, we would be up for taking a part of your space full time if it was available. You know, obviously we would pay for that, or we could come in, you know, just on Sundays and set up and tear down or something like that, or some kind of hybrid. And we did community centers, we did movie theaters, we did schools, but we also did churches as well. And the very first letter that we actually put in somebody's mailbox was at a church, and it was at this one.
Wow.
Believe it or not. Yeah. So this was the very first letter that we sent, and we sent an email to, and then we sent a whole bunch after that. But this was the first one that we gave, and these were the first people to get back to us. And it was just, again, it's a miracle of God. I always say church planting is, if you want to grow your faith, you should get involved in church planting. You don't have to plant a church, but be a part of a launch team or something like that, because it's like having front row seats to watching God do miracle after miracle. Like, you're just sitting there, you're just like, it's like a magic show. It's like, watch me do this. Watch me do this. Check out this miracle. You have no idea how that possibly happened, but I'm making it happen.
Wow.
It's incredible. So yeah, I look at the fact that we're in this building as a miracle of God, because it's an anomaly for a church planter to have a full-time space, you know, from day one. That's just unheard of. So I'm so grateful for that.
And on Long Island, nonetheless.
And on Long Island, yeah. And it works, too. Yeah. I mean, you know that. Like, our situation is unique, too, in the sense that there's not just two churches that meet in this building. There's 5 at the moment, right? 5 churches. And we're like a strip mall of churches here. I think it's pretty cool. Yeah. I love it. And the church that owns the building, their name is Village of Faith. And they called themselves that years ago, before they knew that they would literally be like a village of faith. You know, there's so many churches in here, and we're all totally different. Some of us, we speak different languages for some. Yeah. And I think it's beautiful. It's a beautiful picture of like God's church, like the big C church, all in this one space. So very cool.
That's awesome. So I think I've shared this with you before, but did you know, so I had a recollection. So when my team, everybody kind of knows TechLight actually was the tech integrators for getting a local church started in the auditorium and the facility here. Yeah. And we're very blessed and have had a great relationship since. Uh-huh. And I remember the room, probably have the picture on my phone, but I was in the room. It was actually the anniversary of September 11th. And I was actually back 20 years prior. Was it 20 years? Or 25 years prior? Yeah, it was 25 years prior. In that same room. Because I was going to school here when it was Faith Academy.
That's right.
So for me to have a full circle like that is only a God move, because it's like incredible. Because I'm like, I went here as a kid.
Yep.
And my son still calls it, Daddy, you're at your school? I'm like, no, not my school. It's church now.
Yeah.
But it made that full circle. And actually, my mom found some videotapes of the entry.
Really?
It had bushes in front of it. Like, you got the big bush, but on the walkway there were bushes.
Yeah.
My mom, we had to get a HDMI to RCA converter to watch it, and only half the video was watchable. Mm-hmm. But she found the tapes, and I was like, I know that door. I know that
is
door.
Awesome.
I got to show you something. It was awesome.
So for anybody who's curious, the reason why we're able to be in this space is because it at one point used to be a K through 12 school that DJ went to. And so the building is huge. It's humongous. But I think around 2008 or so, the school shut down. So there's been a lot of empty space in the building for a while. And that's why when we asked if we could start our church here, they were like, well, yeah, we got the space, so go for it. And now we have we have all of our own stuff. We have our own entrance, lobby, cafe, auditorium, kids space, bathrooms, offices, all completely separate from theirs. Yeah, a lot of bathrooms, which is great. It's great. Yeah. So yeah, it's amazing to hear that you had that moment where you got to full circle. Like I was at school in this very spot, and now here I am 25 years later in a church that I helped start. It's pretty neat.
And funny enough, just to close up that little bit, Zach, who was on here a few weeks ago, he went to Faith Academy too. So he got to sit in this and have a recollection of it. And it was just, it was cool.
I never even heard of Faith Academy, and now I meet people all the time who are like, wait a second, that building, I went to school there. It's pretty cool.
A lot of people did, yeah. It was one of the big church schools at the time. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, man. Wow. So, how do you balance trusting God with taking action on your business, the church, or personal decisions?
So, I was thinking about this, and I'm not really sure how those two things are different.
Okay.
Because... Well, I'll just kind of think out loud for you. For me, I take action precisely because I trust God.
Okay.
Right? Literally, Jesus' invitation is to follow. Right? I mean, that was his number one thing. Follow me, follow me, follow me. And as you hear us say around here all the time, following implies movement, and to follow is you are literally actively taking steps in His direction. And so, the reason why we do anything that we do is because, we're doing the best we can to follow Jesus. Not just I don't just do this as an individual, but it's our church's desire to follow Jesus. As an organization, we want to follow wherever Jesus leads us as a church, His bride. So that requires movement. It requires action. It requires doing certain things. And I think the reason why I give, the reason why I forgive, the reason why I practice patience, the reason why I choose, not all the time, but I do my best to choose selflessness over selfishness. The reason why I go out of my way to help somebody is because I'm following. I'm doing my best to follow Jesus. And Jesus was really, he was all about the doing. Because it's the doing, it's the action that makes the difference. You can know things all day long, but that's really not going to change much until you actually put what you know into practice. So, so I'm not sure does that answer your question? Because I'm not sure how to even balance the two, because I think they're the same.
That's a great answer, honestly. I feel like it should be one and the same. The answer should be one and the same, because how you run your business. Some people have two different personas as well. That they run their businesses different than how they have their personal lives. And I think, if your values and your core beliefs are rooted together, I think ultimately, it's got to be, it's the right thought process, So have you ever had to make a tough decision based on your faith specifically, even when it wasn't the easiest choice?
Yeah. Well, besides planning a church, uprooting our life, going from a 3-bedroom house with a 2-car garage to a...
Sounds fabulous.
Yes. To a basement apartment that I call the Hobbit hole, because there's some parts of the apartment that I can't stand up fully in because the ceilings are so low. Literally, I sleep next to the fridge now. That's why I can touch the fridge. But I love it. But other than that, literally following Jesus back to Long Island, where everything about our life would change. There's been plenty of times where I've really had to make some tough decisions based on faith. The one that maybe comes to mind first, like the first kind of encounter I really had with this was with giving. Okay. I remember everything up until that point about following Jesus seemed easy. Like praying, yeah, sure. I got a lot of stuff I want to talk to God about. Reading, I'm just wired that way. I really enjoy connecting with God intellectually and learning more about God and talking about God. So that was easy. Going to church, easy. Volunteering, easy. All that stuff was fun for me. I enjoyed it. Where it got tough is when I started to learn about tithing. Okay. When that came up, and just the idea of generosity in the first place, because I definitely pushed back on that. Because at the time, I'm like basically broke teenager who doesn't have any money. So I'm like, man, it's a lot harder to give like one of my $10 than it is to give 10 of my $100. So I just felt like I would rather do anything else but that. What if I just spend more time? I give more time, whatever. It was a tough decision for me to make to actually trust God with my finances, to trust Jesus with the way he teaches us to manage money. And really, I didn't for a long time. I needed Emily's help. God used Emily to kind of push me there. When we got married, she finally was like, hey, we need to start taking God seriously here, and we need to start tithing. And we were making good money, like at the time. This is a whole other part of our life, but we were working on cruise ships together. And so we had like no expenses, and we had 2 incomes. And she's like, we need to start really tithing. And I'm like, I don't know about that. She's like, no, we're doing it. And I'm so glad that she did. I don't think that my faith, besides planning a church, I don't think that anything else grew my faith more than when I chose to start trusting God with my money. But that was a tough decision. Yeah. Writing, I think at the time we were writing that first check, I looked at them like, this is a lot of, if you actually give 10%, it's a lot of money, especially if you've got 2 incomes and all that. I'm like, this is a lot. This could go towards a lot of other things. Yeah. It's tough. It's tough to do that. And the only way I know how is you just trust God. And there's really no other way to trust but to trust. Mm-hmm. You just got to do it. And so I'm like, all right, God, we're going to give this to you. And we have never once, like we've talked about this just the other day, we're like, have we ever struggled with money? We've never struggled with money. Never. I mean, we've never had like a ton of money, but it's never been like, oh my gosh, I don't know how we're going to pay the bills, or I don't know how we're going to survive. Like God has always provided for us. Even when we moved from Missouri to Long Island, and we completely restarted when we did that too. That was another we just felt like God was telling us, I want you to put your money where your mouth is here, like kind of thing. Like we cashed in our retirement. Wow. We gave basically all of our savings to start local church. And I'm not saying that like to boast about myself. I'm just saying that was another moment where we felt like God was telling us, trust me with this. I will take care of you. And it was tough to do that, but we watched You've seen how God keeps providing every step of the way. So, yeah, lots of times where I had to make tough decisions because of my faith, but every single time God has used it to just show off and to just show us how trustworthy he really is and how much we really can put our faith in him.
Wow. That's amazing. Like, I know, and I can experience firsthand, like, Mike and Emily have both shared it in our church about giving, and we've heard a bunch of giving stories. And I have been in those shoes, and I've even made sure, like, if we, like, we've made a point, like, to make sure we do give. And I'm not saying this just as a friend, as a pastor, but, like, as a person, you know, we want to honor God with our finances. And with, like, my income being variable, like, I'm gig to gig, job to job, I always make sure I take whatever, you know, I try to do 10% out of every check, everything that does come in. And I'm like, let me throw this first. Even if it was a scary number, like there was once it jolted us a little bit, and we're like, okay, like let's watch God provide. And he did, and he provided in multiple ways, not just in financial ways, but he would honor, like, my son was going through health issues, and he honored, you know, our giving, whether that was also giving doesn't have to also just be financial. It can be with your time, with your gifts. You know, I've noticed that, and God just honoring our giving to his kingdom, ultimately tithing specifically as well, like, to be able to just grow our faith and know that he's got it, he's in control. And yeah, it's amazing.
And I mean, I just hear that story over and over and over again. Like, it especially for men, for whatever reason, it just seems like when they finally surrender that area of life, that the financial management and the whole generosity thing, like, faith can really take off at that point.
Yeah.
You know, and there's something about that too. I mean, obviously it's scriptural. It's just what Jesus teaches. But, you know, the greatest commandment, Jesus said, was to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Right? The second is like it, to love others as yourself. But when you think about that first part, loving God, like, this was a huge unlock for me when I thought about how in Matthew 6:21, Jesus says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be. You know, like, because I had at one point thought, I'll give my time. I'll give my energy. That's how I'll give. I don't want to give my money, though. Mm-hmm. But there's a sense in which we are withholding love for God by withholding our money. Because Jesus literally tells us where your treasure is, where your heart is. Like, if we want God to have our heart, we're going to have to give him some of our money. And it's not because he needs it, but because it does something in us, you know, like, it changes us in a way. And that's why I feel like so many people have this story. They're like, I started giving and my gosh, like, things changed for me. Like, because you get a perspective change. For some people, they need to start giving because it's going to force them to start managing their money. You know, like, some people, they don't budget, right? And then they're reckless with their spending. And it's because they can be a little bit. But when you give 10%, that's a big amount. Yeah. All of a sudden, you have to be like, well, how am I going to manage my life with only 90%? And then they're going to make a plan, and they're actually going to do something, and they're going to find, like, oh, this is doable. And they're going to find hope in the fact that I can budget, and I can start saving and all that stuff. I mean, it's transformative in so many different ways. Yeah. But, I mean, ultimately, you've seen it, and I've seen it too. Like, it shows us that we can – it all goes back to that trust thing. Like, it shows us we really can trust God. Yeah. And when you live life knowing you can trust God, you put your trust God and follow him, then your life will get better, and you'll get better at life, right, every time.
I love when you say that. That's my favorite line. Michael Liebler quote.
I can't take credit completely for that. I think I stole that from somebody, but it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. So do you have also, like, a favorite Bible verse or, like, a principle that you've had that, like, has guided you throughout any difficult times?
Yeah, I think this is important for people who are wired like I am. I tend to be quite self-conscious and insecure and in my own head a lot, if I'm not careful, I can easily default to like living in shame, and I'm always looking for perfection for whatever reason. And if things aren't perfect, then I feel shame. And so I have found so much relief in just memorizing a few Bible verses to help reorient me when that ugly side of me tries to take over. And so, yeah, one of them that's been basically like my go-to for the last couple of years since we started on our church planning journey is Ephesians 3:8. And I need this verse because it reminds me why we do what we do. It reminds me like what this is all about in the first place. And when things inevitably go wrong or when things get hard or scary, I just recite this verse back to myself. And this is essentially Ephesians is a letter the Apostle Paul wrote. And in this verse, he says something along the lines of like, even though I am the least deserving of all people. And it's like, this is the Apostle Paul. What do you mean you're the least deserving of all people? Like, you wrote like half the Bible, half the New Testament. But he's like, no, I'm like the least deserving of all God. Even though I'm the least deserving of all God's people, he says, he graciously gave me the privilege of telling the Gentiles. I like to just put the word everyone. He graciously gave me the privilege of telling everybody about the endless treasures available to them in Jesus. Things can get confusing fast when you're planting a church. There's so many different directions that you can get pulled in. And that verse just keeps me grounded. It reminds me, wait a second. I am here because God graciously gave me the privilege of telling everybody about the endless treasures available to them in Jesus. That's what all this is about. It is pointing them to Jesus and the endless treasures that they will find in a personal relationship with him. And I get to take part in those treasures too. I get to enjoy all of that too. So it's just really comforting. And then besides that, Isaiah 43, the first 5 verses, I go back there over and over and over again. This is where God's like, when you're in over your head, when you find yourself underwater, you're not going to drown. When you're walking through the flames, you won't burn up because I am with you. And he explicitly says, I love you and you are honored. And so I have to constantly remind myself of God's love for me. That's like fuel for me. And so I'm constantly like, I'll lay down sometimes and just listen to Isaiah 43, 1-5 over and over and over again. It like gives me strength. So those are probably my 2 go-to.
I love that. I love hearing everybody has different ones, and I love hearing each one because it's so inspiring and knowing like having the verses to cling to.
Yeah.
So we're gonna start wrapping up. So we got a couple
Sure.
questions we're gonna wrap up with. So, how do you keep your faith strong when things don't go as planned? So I'm sure running a church, things don't go as planned a lot of the time.
Yeah. A couple things. First of all, I let myself mourn and grieve. Like Jesus says, blessed are those who mourn, which seems like an oxymoron. Like, how could you be blessed if you're also mourning? Because blessed means happy, essentially. So, but I think he's onto something. Like the alternative to grieving is coping. And coping oftentimes in unhealthy ways. And really the only way through grief is to feel it. And so when things don't go to plan, even if it's something small, like coming on a Sunday and text not working, or something like that, and I'm upset, I let myself be upset. I think it's okay to let yourself feel that. Like I feel the frustration. I feel the sadness, I feel the betrayal, whatever it might be that's going on. I let myself be upset. And then if it's not going to plan, I talk to God about that. And I let God see me upset. I tell God that I'm upset, and there's a lot of precedence for this in the Psalms. Just read the Psalms, and it's like, it's all complaining and frustration. Yeah. And so, like, God's okay with that. He's a loving Heavenly Father. So take that to me. What's on your mind? What's on your heart? Yeah. What's got you bothered? So I like to talk to God about that. And then ultimately remind myself, I do this all the time, remind myself that like success isn't perfection. Success isn't everything going to plan. Success doesn't mean it all works out perfectly. Success is, in the eyes of God, which should be the only thing that matters, success is just obedience. Like, have I been obedient to what God's called me to do, what God's asking me to do. And if I have, that's good. That's it. That's all I need. Like I'm successful. And so even if that thing didn't go to plan, if I did what I feel like God asked me to do, that's enough. And I remind myself all the time. And then I look for what's worth celebrating. That's worth celebrating. Hey, I showed up.
Yeah.
I got out of bed this morning. I went to, like, it may not have went the way I thought it was going to go, but I did it, and in the eyes of God, my obedience is what makes me successful. And then finally, like, when things don't go to plan, I just don't leave that like in my own heart. I like to share with my pastors, with my mentors, with my coaches, and talk to them and get it off my chest. I talk to Emily about it too, and just tell them what's going on and how I'm feeling about that, and invite them in to encourage me and to pray with me, to share advice, whatever. Yeah. So
you like documenting a lot too. I noticed, like, you write a lot down.
I do like to document. Yeah.
Journaling, document.
I journal every day, and that's actually another great thing that I think is helpful in those moments, just to write it down and then to revisit it later and see like where God has taken me from there is so encouraging.
That's amazing. Yeah. So we're gonna end with this question. What is something you could say to somebody to inspire them if they're struggling to trust God on their own right now? Do you have any words of advice, any words of encouragement?
If somebody's struggling to trust God right now, words of encouragement. So, this is a hard question to answer because I would have a lot of questions for that person. Okay. I'd want to like dig down a little bit deeper and figure out exactly why, they're feeling the way they're feeling, or I want to know some things about how they view God, how they see God, how they relate to God, like what makes God seem untrustworthy to them. I'd want to do some exploring and some question answering first. But I suppose, generally speaking, if I were to just kind of generally throw some advice out there without any specific context, I think the best advice that I could give would be not to be afraid to be honest, right? If you're struggling with trusting God, it's okay to be honest with that. It's okay to be honest with yourself, with other people, and with God about whatever those doubts might be, whatever the questions you might have that are keeping you from trusting. And it's okay to be honest with, like with your pastor too. Mm-hmm. Hopefully you have a pastor who understands what Jesus said in John chapter 8. Like, the truth is going to be the thing that sets you free, right? Like, yeah. It's our honesty. It's our willingness to confront like what's in our own heart, what's in our own mind, what's in our own feeling, and be real about that. That gives God the opportunity to set us free, and move us forward. So if you're struggling with trusting God, don't be afraid to be honest. Be honest with yourself, be honest with God, be honest with others about that. Does that answer that question?
I think so, yeah. That's one of our values here at Local.
Yeah. It just so happens to be like our top value here, being honest. Yeah.
Awesome, man. I'm so happy to have you on the podcast. Do you have any last words you'd like to say? Do you want to share anything about the church plant journey?
Oh,
quick.
Well, yeah, I'm excited. So, we've talked about this a little bit together, I'm excited to start a new podcast to help other church planters. Essentially, the point of this podcast will be to help outward-focused church planters overcome things like fear and insecurity and confusion by giving them like proven roadmap to launching a healthy church and leading a healthy church too. So essentially, I just want to share. I think I once heard another pastor say this. I can't promise to fill anybody's cup, but I am really excited to empty mine. I want to share everything that we've learned, over the last couple of years, and give as much helpful advice to church planters as possible so that they can just push past all the overwhelm, because there's so many things that can overwhelm you. And sometimes there's so many voices and there's so many choices out there. And so my hope is that anybody who encounters Church Plant Journey podcast will just discover a little bit of clarity, like a little bit of direction, from somebody who's been there, from somebody who's been in the trenches, and mostly that they will leave feeling encouraged. Like, you can do this. I know if I can do it, anybody can do it. If God's calling you to do it, I promise you can do it. So that's kind of the hope and the heart behind the podcast, and which will be getting started within the next couple of months. I'm really excited. I'm
Awesome.
working on a whole bunch of stuff right now to get ready to launch. But yeah, I'm excited for that. And the last thing I want to say is I'm just grateful for you, DJ. Thank you for doing this, man. Like, I think as much stories of encouragement and faith in God as possible that could reach Long Islanders' ears, the better. Like, the more of that, the better. And one thing I love about you is your tenacity and just how when God puts something on your heart, you do it. And you know what? You just go for it no matter what. And this is an example of that, I think. Maybe there's a lot in it for you. I mean, it's fun probably for you to connect with a lot of pastors, but I don't see you doing this for like personal gain. I think you're doing this because you love God and you love Long Island and you want more Long Islanders to be inspired to follow Jesus. And you know that like there's very few things that are more powerful than people's stories to do that. And so thank you for being willing to take time out of your busy life with a million kids and with a business to run to run a podcast like this so that other people can be, encouraged through faith stories. So I appreciate you, man.
Thank you. I appreciate that and your words. It's been something that God's he's opened the doors and the opportunities to be able to get this up and going. This started back in, I think, March. Yeah. God started planning it, and I reached out to you guys like, this is what, God's telling me he wants me to do. And, I, seeing all the equipment in here, a lot of this didn't exist before that time. And I prayed about it, and, I let God fill the needs that were needed, whether it was financial, repurposing tech, and just let him fill it. And heck, this microphone that I'm talking into right now took over a month to get because actually it was during all the tariff situation going on. So it actually kept getting held up. Right. Because Road is from Australia.
Right.
So wherever the distributor was for these, it kept getting held up. So it was just like, wow. But letting God still provided it. And, I'm staying faithful to what, God's calling me, and, new seasons of my life that I never thought, heck, probably the last year and a half, I'd say, has been, I've taken on new roles, especially here at the church, leading men's groups, different small groups here at the church, being one of the tech leader, the production coordinator, and I never thought like I'd be in these leadership positions. Like I'm completely honored and humbled that, God, has grown me into it. That's something that you and Emily have been able to put me into different spots that, I could lead and disciple people. And it's been a huge honor. And, I'm thankful for you, man. Thank you so much. And, I can't wait to continue and see where this podcast goes, the church goes, and we'll continue to just build God's kingdom here.
Absolutely.
We're inspiring Long Island.
Absolutely.
Thank you, man.
I love you, DJ. You're the man.
Thank you, Mike. Tune in next week for the next episode of Testify Long Island. We got some cool guests coming up that have been booking, so we're excited to see what comes of it. And see you soon. Take care, guys.